would like to ultimately thank you for coming. And this morning's press conference is specifically to put you in a position to understand very clearly what we are about with respect to the collaborative effort between the government and the opposition in treating crime suppression and the wider issue of national security. I want to make it abundantly clear that we see a distinction between collaborating with the government, particularly at the level of the parliament, as against getting involved in the day-to-day activities and recommendations and operations of the executive in dealing with issues out in the street, East Port of Spain and elsewhere. So we, this morning, will tell you specifically what we have gone to the government with, seeking to cooperate with the government for speedy action on the specifics which we believe, if attended to in the way that we are suggesting or some similar way, that we could contribute to some improvement in the crime fighting situation and the improvement in national security in East Port of Spain and elsewhere in the country. The first thing we did, we asked the government to come to the parliament as quickly as possible to abolish the existing arrangements for the appointment of a commissioner of police. As you know, there's a very convoluted process in place involving some very unproductive and opaque evaluation exercises, which includes external parties and opens itself for the appointment of foreigners and so on and so on. It is PNM's view that this situation, which in fact was a condition precedent to UNC support for the package of legislation that came prior to 2010, we have seen that this thing is not working and has virtually no chance of working well. So, since I think it was June of 2010, we had put to the government that we would be open to revisiting and removing this process and replacing it by something which is more simplified, which is confined to a search among nationals of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are now saying that we should do that, and in order to get the best minds available, independent persons in that, with respect to the appointment of a commissioner of police, that the Police Service Commission sitting, and for the purpose of the appointment of a commissioner of police only, can be expanded to include on that occasion and for that purpose the heads of other appropriate independent service commissions. And we believe that if we set about to appoint a commissioner of police by that process, at least we can appoint a commissioner in quick order, and such a commissioner will have tenure, and we get away from this 10 days arrangement which is operating and seems not to have any end in the police service. We believe that there's no substitute for an effective police service in the fight against crime. There's no substitute for restoring public confidence in the police service, for the knowledge that the service is properly managed and is in good hands, and that one of the prerequisites for that is that the leadership of the police service should have some security of tenure where they can get about to dealing with policing rather than making statements about how good they're doing in order to influence the next appointment in 3 weeks' time. So that is something that we think should be done urgently. We put that to the government, and that will form part of the discussion. I've seen you say that we've had agreement. So far, there are no agreements. What we've agreed to do is to examine these issues. The talks were exploratory, and on Thursday, when the two sides sit down, we will hope to get agreement on what I'm saying to you now. So the first thing we hope to get agreement on is to abolish the current arrangement which exists to bring about the evaluation of applicants and the appointment of a commissioner of police, and to put something else in place. We have put some proposals that I just mentioned, and the government may have other proposals, and we hope to get agreement on that and to come up with something different. The second thing we talk about is that, this agreement should bring about the appointment of a commissioner of police, who would then be fully and properly in charge of his men and women, and that this would be a morale booster for police personnel. We also are concerned about the uncertainty as to how suitable the resource base is for the police service. We've heard one commissioner saying that we have enough men. We've heard one saying we don't have enough. We've heard ad hoc policies from the government about hiring hundreds of security guards and whatever. So we are asking, among other things, for an immediate, professionally done manpower audit of the police service. And that audit will tell us who we have as against what we're required to have, and it will also address the issue of specialist personnel within the service to treat with the kinds of crimes that the police service is currently required to respond to. And when we do this audit, it will make it very easy then for us to satisfy the establishment by additional personnel if we have to, specialist personnel if we have to, and also the whole question of promotions within the system, which has been stagnated for quite some time. The government should take steps to ensure that the promotion issue, which is a sore point and a demoralizing matter for police officers, that is addressed in the shortest possible time. We also talk about the need for specialist agency information gathering, because we acknowledge that notwithstanding all other things, the police service functions on information, and that information be converted to evidence, and evidence can lead the police to act against persons who are harming the public interest. It is our view that we are feeling very badly with respect to information gathering, and this is largely as a result of the absence of any significant effort or any effective effort to improve the information gathering agencies of the state, and at the appropriate time we'll discuss this further. But for now, we talked about the need either for something along the lines of the assignment that was being carried out by the Special Anti-Crime Unit of Children to negotiate with the court sought. There is a need for that assignment to be carried out and carried out effectively to provide the police service with information, and that information will be the basis of effective police action. We also asked the government to take immediate steps, to agree to take immediate steps, to use the existing legislative authority to create municipal police units in every local government unit in Trinidad and the Tobago House of Assembly. These are 15 bodies, and we suggested to the government that if authority is given for the hiring of quality personnel, approximately 100 per local government body, that will then immediately increase the available manpower by 1,500, and this localizing of the police service would bring under executive control at the district level persons who will be largely involved in patrolling and information gathering, and they would be in a better position to know who's doing what in the neighborhoods and would feed that information into the wider police service. The law exists now It just requires an action to put it in place. And therefore, it may need minor administrative amendments in the Parliament, and we stand ready to do that in the shortest possible time with the government's agreement, if that is to be carried out. We believe that this would do away with a lot of the lapsing that is taking place about soldier police and all of that. But we also confirm that we support the idea that there's need for the Defence Force to keep backstopping the police in the joint arrangements as and when required. But we don't agree that soldiers should be given police powers. We also ask the government to recognize that one of the biggest problems that the police service has is a lack of trust, as expressed by the population in the police service in general. And that lack of trust is fueled by stories and allegations and information and facts about pervasive corruption throughout the police service. The population just is not comfortable in trusting the officers who are detailed to protect us. To deal with that, we say that the effort to eradicate unsuitable officers must be done with vigor, and one of the ways we suggest that we can do that is to increase the powers of the Police Complaints Authority so it can act rigorously and independently to receive complaints from the public, to initiate investigations on its own, and to carry out those investigations and take prosecutions on its own against members of the police service who have been found to have cases to answer with respect to their conduct as police officers. If we do that, we believe that the behavior of police officers will improve, we'll identify more effectively those who are falling short, and the prosecutions by the Police Service Commission will prevent cronyism to protect persons who ought to be brought before the law. That operation will allow the public to feel more confident in treating with the police service as the public sees the extraction of unsuitable officers and seeing that the officer corps and other officers are persons who are meeting the standards as expected by the population. That confidence and the restoration of that confidence is a major requirement if we are to make any progress with respect to that collaboration between the population and the police service. We put to the government what we consider one of our main suggestions, and that is the immediate establishment of a standing joint select committee of Parliament for crime suppression and security. This standing committee would include government, opposition, independent, and would have the authority, like other committees of Parliament, to call before it and to monitor the operations of matters under the heading of crime suppression and security, and to have the policies, the programs, and the personnel examined in such a way as to bring that kind of oversight, monitoring, and reporting to allow best use of the resources that we are detailing in this fight against crime and the security services in their attempt to establish national security in its broadest sense. We understand that there are issues that go under national security that we will not be able to discuss on the Parliament television, but by and large, there's a lot that the security services are doing and are accountable for that can be examined by Parliament on an ongoing basis, since we have a crisis at our hand, and that crisis requires the involvement of Parliament in this way. And we expect the government will consider this, and if this is done, it will then allow us to turn a new leaf. If we have a proper commissioner in place with proper tenure, we have efforts to root out corruption in the service that's rigorously done by a Police Complaints Authority. We have the promotions issue fixed in the service. We have a proper information gathering network, and we have Parliament overseeing all of this, especially this question of reviewing what is the nation's crime plan. Because what we have right now is voopsing, vapsing, and blindfolding. There is and has been no proper crime plan in this country in recent times. And every time there's an upsurge in violent crime, we have the question, what crime plan are we following? And therefore, this Joint Select Committee of Parliament would be charged with the responsibility of reviewing the plans in place and ensuring that there is some input from the Parliament into what the executive is doing and supporting the executive in following an agreed series of plans to treat with this intractable problem of excessive criminality in Trinidad and Tobago, which is having a negative effect on every aspect of our lives. So that this is one of the things that will come up next Thursday, and we look for agreement from the government. With respect to the police's ability to get convictions in the court, we have to have a supply of information as evidence, and witnesses are integral to that. What is commonplace now is the fear of persons in the national community of having themselves be identified or called to be witnesses to wrongdoing, because they are now afraid that their person can be threatened or their families and so on. The issue of witness tampering in every form, we are asking the government to come to Parliament with the appropriate legislation to identify and establish witness tampering as a specific criminal act which should have severe penalties attached to it. We believe that this is urgent, and this is all part of an idea of witness protection. The physical protection of individual witnesses is very expensive. You can do that off and on in very specific cases, but it can't be that every witness involved in every case will get a safe house and get a ticket abroad. That is extremely expensive and doesn't even work, because sometimes people get tired of being in the protection and they walk away and the whole thing falls down, and the cost is horrendous. However, if the general tone of the society is that if you tamper with a witness in any form or fashion, you will face severe penalties over and above and separate and apart from any other allegation against you, then very soon people will understand that witnesses are to be left alone, because they are the foundation of our justice system. Without witnesses, criminals cannot be prosecuted under our laws, and the criminals know that, and they are in fact taking advantage of and acting with impunity against persons who have information which the court may need to have. We also talk about creating specific laws identifying a particular behavior, and that is menacing, threatening, or forcing persons out of occupancy of lawful property. And such laws can be identified, can be designed and identified to allow clear police action against persons who may be tiptoeing around these kinds of wrongdoings. We sought to extract from the government, particularly in response to the problems of East Port of Spain, a general commitment to a continuation of the urban renewal program, which had just been in its infancy on the arrival of this government, and which has been in fact shelved and has been replaced by a series of ineffective short-term measures. It is our view that the city of Port of Spain does not find favor with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and the government goes out of its way to downgrade the city of Port of Spain, and we appeal to the government to identify the city of Port of Spain as a major economic engine of the country, and the health and growth of that city provides the best opportunity for job creation and other opportunities, particularly for persons who live in and around the city of Port of Spain. And the problems of East Port of Spain cannot be solved by the government downgrading the economic life and the health of the city of Port of Spain. So we asked the government to recognize that and to support and sustain an ongoing program of urban renewal, which will work to the benefit of those who live in East Port of Spain by having their housing units upgraded, and to do so will create significant employment, productive employment, not just make work. And at the end of the day, the renewed city can be a sustainable approach to solving the problems that now seem to be so intractable. We also raised with the government raised the question of returning to the anti-gang legislation. We responded by expressing our confusion, since there are two public positions of the Attorney General on this matter. One dating back to the state of emergency, when the anti-gang legislation was declared to be deficient in law, and that we come to Parliament urgently to fix it. We didn't know exactly what specifically they were talking about. We waited and nothing happened. Lo and behold, recently, we saw the same Attorney General saying that there is nothing wrong with the anti-gang legislation and that the police should enforce the law. We raised this with the Prime Minister, and we asked to see what is the government's position between these two divergent views, and we stand ready to treat with any proposal that the government may bring to the table with respect to amendment of this anti-gang legislation to make it more user-friendly for the police. We also recommend, and we stand very strongly in our position, that the government should take steps to commit Trinidad and Tobago to accessing the treaty which makes our final court of appeal, not the Privy Council, but the Caribbean Court of Justice. We know of no good reason why the commitment given and our financial involvement with the Caribbean Court of Justice and our current position in that. We know of no good reason why Trinidad and Tobago should not be now having the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. If we are to cooperate as we are and to eliminate politics from our decision making, then this is one area where we appeal to the government to come to the table and let us make this forward step. These were the issues that we raised with the government, and these were the only issues that form our discussion, and we do not want to be associated with mundane government activity as if that is what the opposition and the government is collaborating on. Because you would have seen in the statements on these matters, the government went on to talk a lot about how many cars to be bought and how many days work to be given and whatever. We were not involved in any such discussion. They formed no part of the discussions, and these are everyday executive actions which we didn't think that we wanted to get into those details. So whatever the government outlined with respect to East Port of Spain and motor cars and patrols and police posts and things like that, those did not form part of the discussion with us, and we see them as separate and apart from this 10-point arrangement that we went to the government with. The government also raised, as a matter of importance, the Capital Offences Act, the hanging bill. Our position on that is that we remain firm in our support for the existing same law, where capital punishment is the law of the land. But we've also acknowledged that it comes at the end of the process, and if we are failing in information gathering, failing in crime detection, failing in getting convictions, then holding up the capital punishment standard is merely a distraction. Because we were advised that only 3 persons, of all that's been happening in all the years this government been in office, I'm talking about capital punishment, there are only 3 persons on death row who are in line to be considered for the use of capital punishment. Such persons have available to them still resort to the Human Rights Commission, which could delay the process even further. So that should give you an idea of what that conversation on having can really contribute at this point in time. We also are of the view that given the position of the Privy Council, where guidelines are clearly laid down, and of course by the CCG as well, that it takes proper administrative arrangements between the executive and the judicial processes to see that we can comply with what is laid down by the courts of appeal. Outside of that, we are not prepared to engage in any toing and froing over who should have and who shouldn't have. We know what we have to do. The Privy Council has laid it down, and it is for the government to try and meet those targets, and if the targets cannot be met, well then say so. So we confine ourselves to the 10 points I just raised there with you, which are things that we can do if the government agrees to do these or similar things, and we will work with the government on those matters. And that is where we act with this collaborating with the government on the issue of crime fighting and national security for Trinidad and Tobago. Any questions?
Just a matter of clarity, these issues were raised and not discussed.
We had some preliminary discussions, but we didn't agree, there was no agreement. We went there with these things, saying to the government, these are the things that we think we can work on. We think we can come to some agreement on these things. Hopefully we can get agreement on them in short order. What we agreed on, what both sides agreed on, is that we would work expeditiously to do what we're saying we're going to agree on. And if it requires parliamentary action, we'll move to the parliament expeditiously. But as I speak to you now, there was no agreement to do these things. These are proposals that the opposition put to the government. And when we meet, there were some preliminary discussions. We have a sense that some of them might find agreement. We have a sense that some of them may not find agreement with the government. But as the two teams meet on Thursday, that's where the agreement would be sought. Because at that stage, we will know what the positions are, and both parties will come. The government will come with a response to what we have put, and we are open to hearing what the government has to say, and hopefully we can find common ground on most, if not all of them.
So that's really if you can't find common ground, let's say most of your proposals are shut down, will there still be a collaboration between opposition and government?
Well, if we can't find common ground, then we will all be open to work at the public interest. But it would mean that there are other points of view on the table. And the government is in fact the current executive. And if they will not do these things, then the population must know that and must take it into account as to whether these are the things that should be done to give us a better chance in fighting crime and improving our security.
Dr. Rowley,
and that is why I'm here this morning to let you and the population know, let the population know through you, that these are the proposals that we have put before the government, and we are willing and able to support these proposals with action that is urgent. If the government doesn't agree with these, by putting alternative proposals that we find unacceptable, we'll do. And if the government has other proposals that are better than these, we will support them.
Dr. Rowley, out of the 10 proposals put forward to the government last Thursday, the Prime Minister in her address, she outlined a couple of those, in terms of the PTA, witness tampering and all of those. Is it that those are some of the aspects, maybe some positive response was given and not so much the others? Can you?
Well, as I said, we have a sense that the government is open to some of these things and the others not so open. And that's why the discussions continue. So it is hopeful that we will get some agreement on some of these things.
If, let's say on this Thursday that the Prime Minister, some form of agreement is made, do you think that possibly, I know the opposition is always saying sometimes that the government promises certain things but they don't follow through. Is it that, let's say on Thursday, they agree to some of the things? Are you in any way concerned that even then nothing will take place?
Well, that is why we need to have, one of the things I hope that the government will agree to is the Standing Committee of Parliament. So if we have that, and there's agreement to do certain things, then that committee can drive the process by pressing it. On the other hand, if we don't get agreement on everything on Thursday, then we continue to meet because you may not find all the requirements on Thursday, but what we agree on we can implement. And the implementation then becomes a matter for the administration to bring to the parliament if parliament is required. If it's just administrative, then it's cabinet. For example, the whole question of the municipal policing, that is already in the law. It is just for the cabinet to agree to do it. So if they agree that that's an idea whose time has come, then the cabinet can proceed to do that without parliament. There may be need for some parliamentary tweaking to bring the Tobago House of Assembly in. But once we agree that the local bodies will have their own local police services, whatever the number is, we suggest 100, it could be 75, it could be 125, we're not married to 100. That's an idea that we think if we put it out there and implement it, could bring some improvement in our response to the lack of security in our neighborhoods. So some things are administrative, which the cabinet can do. Other things may require parliament. We are putting to the government what we think should be done, and these things together will improve the situation. What we don't want is to get involved in getting bogged down in things like hanging on who's going to have, who's not going to have, when we know that that in itself is not going to be a solution because we don't even have people to proceed with. And the ones that we have, the loopholes are still there for them, and we don't see a way of getting out of those loopholes. And if we're going to comply with the strictures of the Privy Council, it requires administrative and maybe some parliamentary things. If it does, then we will agree to move quickly to Parliament and pass good law. I'm not saying here that the opposition will support any and everything the government brings to the Parliament, because this government has notoriously brought a huge amount of very bad bills to the Parliament. We're saying once it comes and it's in the public interest, our support is there to expedite it.
Dr. Rowley, any of the 10 points outlined or solutions outlined were presented by the previous administration that the government scrapped?
I'm not clear I understand your question.
Okay, the 10 points that you brought forward for the crime solution, were they brought forward before by your previous administration, the PNM, and were scrapped by this present government?
Well, I can point to the information gathering arrangements where this morning, only this morning, there were 2 former government ministers. One, a Minister of Justice, the other, a Minister in the Ministry of National Security. Members of the current government this morning on television saying that it was a mistake for the government to have dismantled SWORD and not replace it with something that is effective. 2 ministers of government were saying that this morning, and they went on to say they have no doubt that action on the part of the government has contributed to the ineffectiveness of the police service. No, that is not me speaking. That is the government spokesperson from inside of the government in the area of national security and crime suppression saying that the government created a huge mistake by doing what they did. Of course, we know what happened and we know why it happened. But we say, let us pick up the battle and proceed to restart the race.
Would you be insisting that everything like so be reestablished as soon as possible?
There has to be effective information gathering. The government has shut down virtually everything, and more importantly, highly trained personnel who were deployed in the SWORD unit to carry out the effects of information gathering, to do covert work and analysis. Those persons have been dismissed from their posts and have been scattered like chaff within the systems or even out of their jobs, and that was a waste of effort. I mean, I heard this morning one minister saying that the borders are completely open, and it was a mistake not to have replaced the OPVs with something, and the cancellation of the OPVs was in fact a mistake. So this is where we are. And in the meantime, what we're being fed are sterile statistics, questionable statistics from government and from the police about the state of crime and criminality in the country. When in fact, we as citizens know that there's precious little improvement and in fact a whole lot of deterioration with respect to security of the person and national security in general.
The president of the Downtown Owners and Merchants Association told us last week that there has been a history, not just this government, but previous administrations, in terms of state contracts and certain people in certain communities, and that this has been fueling a lot of the crime, especially in areas like East Port of Spain and so on.
Well, I don't know that the government will stop awarding contracts. What I do know is that if there is criminal connection in the award of contracts, as I'm sure there is in some aspects of the government big programs, that they need to be addressed by law enforcement. You cannot run away from the fact that if persons, whether they are priests, teachers, doctors, nurses, or handymen, if they are breaking the law, there's a requirement for law enforcement to take place, and law enforcement is the responsibility of the police service and of the security arms. So I don't know how that changes the picture. We know where some of that problem is, right? And to address it, there has to be proper information gathering. It is not everybody in East Port of Spain is a criminal. As a matter of fact, the vast majority are victims. And if there are contractors in there who are fighting over a contract and misbehaving themselves and buying guns and shooting people, that is a matter for law enforcement, which is requiring information gathering as to who is doing what. And if the government is awarding contracts in a manner to encourage that, then the government should know that, and the population should know that, and the requisite action needs to be taken. But we can't just throw hands up and say that there is this thing that is happening and not holding people accountable either to do the job that they're supposed to do or to behave the way they're supposed to behave.
Mr. Rowley, now on the flip side, as they ramp up efforts to control crime, are you worried at all of infringements on civilian rights, improper arrests, unlawful detention, like we saw with some 20 suspects in East Port of Spain following the shootings, and also previous to that, the SOE?
Well, we are very concerned that in responding to the pressing crisis, that instead of getting sustained police information gathering and requisite responses to that, where there are consequences to people's actions on an ongoing basis, we get a misguided state of emergency, where there's abuse of people's rights and a waste of money and a demoralization of the services themselves that are required to carry this out. Our position on the state of emergency has been very clear and is on record. And when it comes in a massive form as in 2011, or in piecemeal forms, these invasions and retreats, lockdowns and PR, that is not a substitute for policing. And the fact that people are picked up in grab and released in grab should tell you that there's a missing component of adequate information to bring about the proper enforcement of law against the wrongdoers.
Dr. Rowley,
And even as we fight crime in a crisis, we have to be cognizant that we are a society governed by laws, and persons have the right to protection of the law and not be exposed to the traps of exuberant officers trying to ensure that something is seen to be done when in fact the problem is not really being addressed.
Dr. Rowley, a number of the proposals you made to the Prime Minister appears to be long term or would take a certain amount of time to actually be accomplished if they are agreed to. What did the opposition propose for short term?
Well, I don't agree that they're all long term. In fact, they're short term, they're medium, and in fact, however long the journey is, it starts with the first step. I started this morning by telling you we want a proper commissioner of police in office who has tenure, who can take charge of his men and women, who can begin with confidence to look at his situation and to put plans in place which have some kind of a prospect of succeeding, because he's not there worried about his next extension of contract in 3 weeks. This part-time arrangement, and we've had some humongous mistakes in this arrangement, And we need to establish confidence. Confidence by the population in the police service, confidence in the police service in itself, confidence of junior members in their senior ranks, and removal of criminals from the police service. These are all immediate actions that are required. These are not long-term measures.
Not only you raise the point about the issue of crime detection, the homicide detection rate and so on. The passage of new laws or many existing laws would not necessarily change the situation in terms of enforcement. So then how much of a solution can new laws provide if the police service, as you are saying and others are saying, are just not getting the criminals in the courts?
Well, you notice what I said this morning was not all about law. It was about administration. It was about removing bad law, which is an impediment. So it's a mix of things. If amendments to the laws are required, we need to make the amendments. If new laws, like I mentioned, 2 offences, and let's not get cynical. What happens right now is that if a person interferes with a witness and there's any attempt to prosecute that person, the prosecution is limited within the context of promoting the cause of justice, which is a convoluted arrangement which could create a lot of difficulty in proving the charge and persons escape from that. But if you create a specific charge of witness tampering, then whatever the person does that the court deems to be, right, tampering with the witness, it makes it easier to treat with that as against a prosecution of perverting the course of justice. Because at the end of the day, the good lawyers will argue perverting the course of justice and find that, oh, this may not be so, this may not be so, and it's easier for them to escape that. And it's not positive. Perjury and perverting the course of justice is not positive. However, we know that witness tampering is one of the reasons why people are afraid to be seen or to be known to be a witness. So, if witness tampering is made a specific offense with specific penalties, it makes it easier to treat with it. And the same thing with evicting people from homes. We have a specific law on kidnapping. Kidnapping and kidnapping for ransom. We codify the law specifically for that. If you take somebody against their will, that's an offense. We spell that out. If you ask for a ransom, we spell that out. We are now saying if you go to somebody's home and you use any menacing act or force, and those persons have to leave their home in fear as they are doing now in East Port of Spain, then we should identify that as an action which we observe and which, if you do it, it's very easy for the police to find the evidence within the context of the law and say you have done that or you're accused of doing this and take you down. If you don't have it specified like that, it becomes more difficult for the police to act. So the law, in effect, makes the offense, and it creates the tool to proceed to identify and treat with the offense. So I'm not saying here that all you're going to be doing is go to Parliament and pass a law. I maintain that if we enforce 40% of the laws on the books in Trinidad and Tobago, this country's quality of life will improve dramatically. So law enforcement is required. It doesn't matter what the law is, it doesn't matter how trivial the offense, it requires the gathering of information in the form of evidence to get a prosecution going and to get a conviction. So the law in itself cannot give you a prosecution. There are no substitute for information gathering. And when you have violent crime on the rise or frequency unacceptable, as it is here, information gathering is the crux of the matter. And if there's the need for legislation, then we put it. But we have put things in place with legislation, which seem not to have brought about any relief. One of the first things we did under this government and under this new opposition was the establishment of an interception of communications law. I am not aware that that is being used to fight crime. I'm aware that I have I'm a fourth or fifth phone now because they wouldn't leave my phone alone. Right? In somebody's mind, I'm a criminal or I'm somebody who they're interested in. But that bill was not meant to look at me and law-abiding citizens. It was meant to help us in the fight against crime. That's one of the first things this government did and got opposition support on it. In fact, it was my team that did the bulk of the work on that. And we passed the law. We're not seeing any improvement in information gathering. We also have the Anti-Gang Act. Instead of gathering information, identifying the criminals, penetrating their cells, getting witnesses and so on, you declare it an emergency and you lock up people, you jail them, you have to release them when the emergency ends. So you can have the law, but you can abuse the law, or you cannot use the law in the way the parliament intended.
Dr. Rowley, is this kind of collaboration between opposition and government a first for the country? This kind of collaboration?
Under Mr. Patrick Manning's government, there was a spurt in crime, and a number of things were being done, because there's never any one switch to flick to turn off the violent crime scourge. There are a series of things you have to do. There's a cause and effect, and there are many causes, and there are a series of effects. When the Manning administration went to the parliament with a package of legislation to be passed into law to empower the security services to respond to the criminal element, the UNC opposition took the position that they will not support any of those pieces of legislation unless we agree to a new arrangement for the appointment of the Commissioner of Police. Because it was their story that the Service Commission appointing the Commissioner of Police as it was then, with the Prime Minister being able to veto that appointment, was unacceptable because the Commissioner was a tool of the administration. And of course, in order to get the package of legislation passed, the Manning administration agreed to the UNC suggestion of this new and convoluted way of appointing a Commissioner of Police through the Parliament. The second stage is worse than the first, because this arrangement gives the Parliament equals the majority party equals the Prime Minister total and absolute control over the appointment of the Commissioner of Police. And the running arrangement of an acting Commissioner of Police, the very thing that they tried to prevent in the early stages, is what now is the order of the day. And we are saying we need to abolish that and go back to some system where you can trust officers of the state to make a decision. We can appoint a Commissioner of Police without getting into some, unacceptable series of hoops and bars. So we did have collaboration before, and in fact, we've collaborated with the government on other matters. This opposition collaborated with the government on a series of pieces of legislation. We have voted for more legislation in this government than the average in previous times. In fact, the existing government has a record of taking a position of not supporting anything the government did, because it does not make the government look good. We have the opposite position. If it is in the public interest, we support it. If it is not, we don't. And all the amendments to crime-fighting laws that came to the Parliament, except the ridiculous ones, we supported. So the record of collaboration is there, but in this case, we are talking about collaborating in a deeper way, where we bring ideas to the government, or suggest to the government that some things that are dormant should be activated, and that if it needs our support is there for that.
How do you respond to Mr. Warner's claims that it's happening because the ILP is being viewed as a threat?
I don't think Mr. Warner is in this story. Mr. Warner's stories are different than ours. I mean, we are a political party. We've been here for 50 odd years. We fought 20 odd political parties. I don't know why Mr. Warner or anybody would think that the ILP is different to all the other political parties that the PNM would have fought against.
Dr. Rowley,
It's a bit of
on a separate note, approaching on around some point in this time is the anniversary of the declaration of Section 24. Does the PNM plan to do anything in commemoration? Declaration.
except to observe that our young people are meeting very soon to express themselves symbolically by surrounding the treasury, and that Alibaba may have lost one of the thieves, Alibaba and 39 thieves, you know. We think that this matter of Section 24 has so damaged this country that it will have far-reaching and long-term consequences. And it's not just a question of celebrate, there's nothing to celebrate. There's everything to be hurt about and to be concerned about.
Dr. Rowley, on Saturday, the ILP walked through Laventille. Working alongside him was Peter Taylor, former legal affairs minister under the PNM administration. But he spoke to us a little bit and he said that he sent a couple of letters to the PNM, but no response was given. But the ILP requested him on a number of occasions, so he was there. He didn't say he was, joining the ILP, but he said they requested him, whereas he spoke to the PNM on a number of occasions and they gave him no response. What would you say?
I am sure Mr. Taylor can speak for himself. So I would not want to speak for Mr. Taylor on his political interests. With respect to letters he sent to the PNM, I'm sure Mr. Taylor knows that if he wants to join the PNM, that the process is very simple. That you sign a form like everybody else. And his letters of commendation and of whatever they were treated by the parties with courtesy.
Are the doors of the PNM open to Mr. Taylor?
Well, the PNM has a process of accepting membership, and unless you have something very, very wrong with you, you have a good chance of being accepted as a PNM member. So I don't know that there's an issue here.
And if he decides to join the ILP?
That is still a free country, yeah? That would be his decision. But I mean, we have not done anything to prevent him from returning to the PNM. So if he's exploring his options, these are issues at the personal level. But the doors of the PNM wide open to any citizen who would like to join us and subscribe to our fundamental principles in nation building. Thank you very much.